Hi everyone, we've got a really tasty dish for you this evening. It's a Spanish recipe for beef cooked in red wine. We're having it with mash and broccoli. It's a lovely sauce. There's lots and lots of wine in it. The beef's lovely and tender. And I'll hand you over to Ting for the ingredients.
สวัสดีค่ะเพื่อนๆวันนี้จะมาทำเนื้อตุ๋นไวน์แดงเนื้อตุ๋นไวน์แดงนี้เป็นสูตรมาจากต้นตำรับนะคะมาจากสเปนแล้วก็เราจะเสิร์ฟกินพร้อมกับมันบดแล้วก็บรอกโคลีค่ะ
It's an interesting one tonight. This is beef in red wine, a recipe from Spain. What's particularly good about it is that most of the juice comes from the red wine that the beef is prepared in. And it has some other little ingredients that make it a just slightly sharper sauce, a bit different to usual. We're going to have it with mash and broccoli tonight. And this will cook probably enough for, I should think, 5 or 6 people. So we'll get going with the ingredients. Here we've got a kilo of beef, nice beef here, very little fat, which is good. And if you're using beef which is possibly not terribly tender, then of course the longer you cook it, the better. Or you can prime it by cooking it in the wine first for a couple of hours, even 4 or 5 hours, to just get everything ready. Then the beef will fall apart when you take a mouthful. Anyway, a kilo of beef, and we've got a small handful of celery leaves, 1 cube of Knorr beef flavor for making stock, 1 medium-sized carrot, 5 full-size rashers of bacon. Well, bacon here is like other things, it's not quite what one's used to, so we've got rashers that aren't quite full size, so we're going to put 6 or 7 in. A couple of medium-sized onions, 120 grams of mushrooms, and then we'll have some paprika to go with it, and of course sea salt and fresh ground pepper. And then we've got 450 milliliters of red wine and 50 cc's of gin. This is an unusual additive, and we found we'd run out of gin. However, luckily I had a little miniature of Hendrick's there, and Hendrick's has got a beautiful juniper and cucumber as well flavor, so that's perfect. 50 cc's, a large shot of gin. We're having a teaspoon of garlic powder and a teaspoon of chili powder to just give it that little bit of zip that you want. And then some flavoring from 3 bay leaves, or enough bits of bay leaves to make up 3 bay leaves, a very large pinch of thyme, and a very large pinch of rosemary. And all those will be combined into the most delicious sauce. If the wine boils off, then you can always add a bit of water, because the sauce is particularly nice when you're eating it with mash. So let's get going. Okay, we've got a tablespoon of olive oil in there that's very hot, and we're going to scald the beef by hurling it in. And we just leave it there. Once it's gone in, flatten it out a bit, but leave it there so that don't stir it around, so that the beef on the outside tries to brown, because of course the browning gives you enormous amounts of flavour. So you pop that in and leave it until you look a piece here and there. And when it's brown on the outside, or seems to be a bit brown, you can turn it over. And as soon as all the sides, the beef's had a chance to cook a little bit, we'll toss in some flour and then the wine to start the cooking process. Okay, that's been cooking about 3 minutes. There's some brown bits. A lot of juice has come out of the beef. So now we toss in a couple of tablespoons of flour, which is going to soak up a lot of the juice. This is for the sauce, of course. And stir it around. And it'll make it into a dry, pasty kind of a mix. And that's all right. You then want to cook that for 2 or 3 minutes to take the flouriness out of the taste of the flour, would you believe? As it's only there to thicken the sauce. Okay, you can see that that's dry and there are brown bits there. And now we're ready to add the wine. Look at that, doesn't that look delicious? All that lovely red wine. Okay, and we stir it round a few times so that the flour will begin to dissipate into the wine to make a sauce. And we'll cook it like this for a couple of minutes and then transfer it into the pot that everything else will go into as well. There we are. Couple of minutes, and so now we transfer it into the main pot, which we will transfer onto a slow heat to let it simmer, and we'll prepare the wok for the next stage. Okay, so the beef is beginning to simmer in the wine, which is good. So before we go on with the next stage, we are going to need a bit more sauce than that. So we're adding 200 ml of mineral water to just pad out the juice a bit, because the juice is particularly tasty. And we'll also add the rosemary, the thyme and the bay leaves, which go in, and the chili powder. I've reduced the chili powder on my wife's instruction to half a teaspoon of chili powder. The garlic powder stays the same as a teaspoon, and that gets mixed in. And the only other things we'll need is the celery leaves, which go in. It all gets mixed round, and then we'll also add the beef stock cube before we go ahead with the next stage, which is the vegetables here, which are going to be fried lightly. Okay, the beef is simmering away in the saucepan on a low heat with a lid on. So now the next stage is to fry the bacon, which has been sliced up into little strips. And now that the bacon's well fried, we add the onion. Stir it around a few times so that the onion begins to break up. Because we also are going to prime the carrot. That needs to break down a bit. And the mushrooms go in as well with their juice. And we stir these around until the onion's softer and the carrots will have become a bit softer. The mushrooms will have released their juices as well, and it'll all be beginning to be quite yummy. Those are really nearly ready. So we'll now add a teaspoon of paprika, sprinkle it over the top, and the 50cc of gin for its herbal qualities, of course. That gets poured over the top, and it goes in at this stage because the alcohol, of course, needs to burn off so that the flavour comes through. And we'll give this a quick stir around and then add it to the other pot, which is simmering away and is probably getting close to being ready. Look at that, doesn't that look absolutely delicious? So, there we have it. And the transfer is taking place. Give it a good stir round. And at this point you can look and see whether you reckon that's going to be enough sauce for you. Of course it is. It isn't supposed to be a soup, and it's not really a stew. That's probably enough. If of course you want more sauce because you're sauce freaks, then add a bit more wine or add a bit more water. Of course, if you add some more wine, it will give it a bit more flavour. But for the time being, we'll leave it like that and let it cook for as long as possible. My God, look at that. It's been going for about an hour and a half, and we've tasted it now, and Ting reckons it needs a little bit of salt. So we're adding a bit of sea salt there to just, it tastes absolutely delicious. And a bit of pepper as well. And we'll stir that around and let it seep out into the surrounding juices. I think it's got enough sauce. I don't think we need to add any more sauce. And got a nice little bit of spark from the chili. So thank God we didn't use as much as I wanted to. That looks absolutely fantastic, so we'll serve it up in a minute. And there we have it, the final product steaming from the stove. Looks good, absolutely. That nice, thick, rich, juicy sauce. Lovely pieces of soft, tender beef, mash to soak it all up, and broccoli to give you the goodness you need as a whole. There we are, beef and red wine, just for you. Enjoy.